Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining me on this in this discussion of how to look for work in oil and gas in Calgary. This talk really evolved from a lot of information that I've gathered over the years as a headhunter. I was a headhunter for 5 years, looking for jobs for people, and based on some of the information that I was given when I was out looking for work. Some of the recommendations that people had given me that I put to use when I was attempting to find a job myself. And when I got out and as a headhunter, of course, my job was to find jobs for people. And so I spent a lot of time talking to people and guiding them on how to utilize the same methodologies that I had used when I was looking for work. And as I went through this over and over again with people from a lot of different backgrounds and histories, I realized that there was a lot of repeatability of their experiences, and just over time you realize that there's a pattern that emerges from the whole job search process for people. And basically what it came down to is that I believe that there's a particular approach that is most effective in looking for work in oil and gas in Calgary, and it's based on some of the realities of the Calgary oil and gas job market. So let's just talk a little bit about Calgary and the nuances of the Calgary oil and gas business for starters. Calgary, as you are, if you're not aware yet, you'll be aware of soon, everything happens in 10 square blocks here. All the major oil and gas companies, the majority of the service companies, all have their offices right in the downtown core. So that makes it a unique set of circumstances relative to other oil and gas centers in the world. I started my career as a geophysicist with Amoco. And Amoco had their Houston office, is where I took a lot of my training. And Amoco Westlake was over here on the west side of Houston. Chevron was downtown. Shell was up over here somewhere, up by the airport, right, Keith? Towards the north side there. So these things are all, 10 miles away in rush hour traffic, right? So those companies, there was very little interaction between those companies on a day-to-day basis unless it was through something associated with the business. So in other words, you wouldn't go out for lunch from Amoco here and run into somebody from Shell. This didn't happen, right? In Calgary here, you go out for lunch and you tend to run into people in the business, other people that you know. So Calgary is a very small, geographically focused oil and gas business that really makes this methodology even more important in this scenario. Basically, what I've come to understand is that there is, within any company in oil and gas, and within any company, I would dare say, in any other industry as well, they have a hiring process, right? And it starts basically with a resume, right? Typically starts with a resume, but nobody ever hires a resume, do they? Right? Nobody ever says, well, that's a great resume, let's send them an offer. Let's send her an offer. That's great. No, there's always at least one interview, sometimes several, right? And I believe that the interview process is there for only one reason, and that's to raise the trust level in the candidate so it matches the job they have at hand. Okay? So each of these steps, each of these interview steps is just raising trust. And trust, the reason they have to have an interview is because trust is only built face to face. Trust is not built over the phone. Trust is not built via email. Trust is a face-to-face thing. Texaco Pennzoil That was a $7.5 billion deal that stood on a handshake. It went all the way to the Supreme Court on a handshake. Because for those few moments, those two sides trusted each other. Because they knew, because they had a handshake, they had to be in the same room, they had to be face to face, right? So if you believe or if you accept that the process is one of building trust, then a whole lot of other things come out of that understanding, right? So the first is, I don't know what the statistics are. When I was out looking for work before, I went through a company called Right Management, and they said 25% of jobs make it to print, right? So get into the paper, get onto the internet, whatever. That means 75% don't, right? So this 25%, because they're very public, have by definition a lot of competition. So if you really want a job, where should you be targeting your efforts? On the 75% that never make it to print, right? So here's the scenario, right? There's all these jobs out here that we're not accessing. So the goal is, how do we access more opportunities? How do we hear about more stuff, right? I like to think of it like you're trying to build a spider web, right? You're trying to build a spider web that's as big and as densely webbed as you can make it. So if a job flies through, it catches on somebody you know. All right? So this is the value of networking, right? When I was out looking for work myself, people gave me all kinds of guidance. They said, well, make sure you meet people. Make sure you get a chance to get face-to-face with people. I said, sure, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, why wouldn't I? Another thing they said was, when you're out doing this, make sure you keep good notes, right? So that when you said you're going to call somebody or said you're going to meet them, make sure you keep good notes. I said, well, of course I'd keep good notes. Why wouldn't I? That just makes sense. And they said also, when you get a chance to meet somebody, make it an informational interview, right? Ask lots of questions. I said, well, sure, that's just natural, right? Why wouldn't you? But what I came to understand is, when you start to group all these things, you group them all under the umbrella of building trust. It all makes sense, right? Because that face-to-face meeting is important, because that's where trust is built. You keep good notes because, and this is very important, we build trust by doing what we say we're going to do. How's that for a bombshell? You'd be surprised how many people don't do what they say they're going to do, right? I built my business, my headhunting business, around that one simple concept. Yes, I had a geophysical background. Yes, I had a technical background. That helped. But fundamentally, I looked for opportunities to show people that I did what I said I would. The other thing is the informational interview. Right? Why is an informational interview important? Why do you go in and ask lots of questions? Think of it this way. You're trying to build a relationship with that person, right? So Dustin, think about it, right? You go to a party, right? You meet a young lady there, you're attracted to her, right? So you sit down beside her, who do you talk about? All right? If you want to build a relationship with her, you don't talk about Dustin, do you? Right? You want to build a relationship with that person, so you talk about them. And that's what the information, you're asking them, how did you get your start? What do you like about being a geologist? What do you like about being a geophysicist? How do you enjoy Talisman? Right? That's the process. And it's important because it helps you build a relationship with them. Okay? Any questions on that sort of basic part? Is that it's all about trust? See, what I believe, because Calgary is so interconnected and everybody knows everybody, it becomes a scenario that it goes something like this. If there's a job in the paper, right, like this, And think of this as the lineup to get to that job in the paper, right? And you don't know anybody within that organization or whatever. You just get in the lineup with everybody else, right? You submit your resume online. Who's ever submitted a resume online, never heard anything back? Yeah, once or twice, huh? Yeah, it disappears into the ether, right? But here's what happens, right? See, you're just in a lineup with everybody else. You've sent your resume and nothing happens, right? It's kind of like going to Disneyland, right? You say you go to Disneyland and here's the lineup to get on Space Mountain, right? You really want to get on Space Mountain. That's your favorite ride. And you're in the lineup and you shuffle along, and somebody comes along, closes the door, says 4 o'clock, come back tomorrow. You say, but I want to get on Space Mountain. He said, sorry, closed for the day, right? And unbeknownst to you, there's a little door over here for friends of Mickey Mouse. And they've been walking to the front of the line all day and you didn't even know it, right? That's what you want to be. You want to be a friend of Mickey with as many people in as many organizations as you can to access those jobs. If you think about this, and I've talked to HR people about this very thing, here's your standard scenario when you didn't know anybody within Talisman, for instance, right? You submit your resume online, it disappears into the ether. You never hear a thing, right? But let's say you saw that ad online and you'd met somebody at Talisman, you'd met Doug Colvin, you'd met Axel Nielsen, you'd met somebody over there previously. And so you see that job and you call them up and say, hey, Axel, this is Darren here. You remember we met a couple of weeks ago? Oh yeah, how you doing, Darren? Well, pretty good. He says, so how's the job search coming, Darren? Oh, pretty good. Yeah, there's something on Talisman's website that looks really interesting to me. Oh, really? Would you mind submitting my resume to HR for me? Axel said, not at all. Happy to do that for you, Darren, right? So here's the HR person. It's important that you look at it from the HR perspective, because generally HR is involved in the process, right? For most companies. So here's the HR person. They're sitting there and they've got a stack of resumes like this in front of them, right? And their job is to take that stack and reduce it to something like this by 4:30 today. That's their job. They have to get that done today. Get through those resumes. So they're picking them up and they're giving them the 30-second scan. And then they're making a decision on which way it goes. Which, keeping it or throwing it out. And your resume might be in that pile there somewhere, but what's the chances of yours making it through? Don't know. But Axel prints off your resume, walks down to HR and says, you know, I met this fella Darren a couple of weeks ago. He's interested in that job. Oh, really? I'll take it. And it goes right over here. All right? Doesn't get you the job, but it gets you a lot further ahead than you were. So it's really important. That's the connection is, so even jobs that there's a lot of competition for, knowing people helps, right? The internet is a great place to look for work. It's just not a good place to find it. That's just a quick straw poll here. Anybody know anybody that's got a job through the internet? In oil and gas in Calgary? I know two, one of whom I placed. I found his resume in monster.ca. And the other person he's a young engineer, he got his job through the internet. But that's the only people I know. That's not very many, right? The internet is a great resource, but don't be fooled into thinking that it's actually going to help you find a job. You know, one of the things, because I talk to a lot of people that are just kind of getting into the business, I try to get them to understand how important it is to think about these relationships not just for today and not just for this job. I believe you have to think of it as if you're building a house, right? You want the roof, right? That's the security, that keeps the snow off, that keeps you warm in the winter. But you have to build the walls in the basement, right? The walls in the basement are your relationships of trust. And not just for this job, but for your career, right? In 2 years' time, 5 years' time, whatever it is, maybe something blows this roof off. This business is pretty renowned for blowing the roof off, right? Something downturn in prices, a lot of people in the streets, or maybe after 5 years, you're thinking, you know, I'm not really happy with this roof anymore. It's not really, it's starting to get a little leaky. It's not really giving me what I was hoping. And so you need to go find a new roof. Well, I say those walls in the basement, those are what positions you for that next opportunity. Opportunities come from relationships, especially in this business. I started my business as I'd been a geophysicist for 15 or 16 years. Started my business as a headhunter and just walked out and started accessing all those people that I'd known for years, right? You'll hear it time and again in this business about how important it is not to burn bridges. All those sorts of things. It's all about this. It's relationships that allow us to stay as employed as we want to be. Right? I gave a talk at the joint convention there, I think it was in 2003, on how to stay as employed as you want to be. And I said there's 3 things that I believe you have to do. One is to be technically competent. Some would argue that that's not as important, but I believe it is. Be technically competent. The second thing is to treat people with honesty and integrity. And the third is to keep your network strong. If you do those 3 things, I believe you should be able to stay as employed as you want to be. Now comes the tough part, right? Because this is fundamentally, in order to build that spider web, you have to have a process, I believe, you have to have a process that's effective. I've seen people over the years, many people who have become frustrated with the process, and it's a pretty demoralizing business looking for work, right? You hear no all the time. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. You may hear it in different forms, but no, 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 no. And there's not too many of us whose ego is so strong that it can take that kind of a pounding, right? So over time, after a while, it just kind of, people give up. I know lots of people that have given up, and they've gone on and they've just said, you know, I'll make a career doing something else. So the key thing then is, how do you expand your network? How do you build that spider web, right? That's fundamentally how the process is based on that. So how do you achieve that? Well, first thing we need to understand is what we want to achieve is face-to-face contact. That's with as many people as we can, right? That's fundamentally, and it doesn't matter, at least to me, if I'm looking for work and I'm a geophysicist or a geologist or an engineer, it doesn't matter to me if I meet somebody in land in that organization or somebody in accounting. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to meet people and build trust within that organization, right? Because eventually I'm going to have to build it through the interview process, right? Eventually you're going to have to build it, so build it first. Become a friend of Mickey, right? Okay? So the key things that you have to understand is, well, let's think of it this way. Here you are at the center of your search, or of your spider web, right? So the first thing to do is talk to all the people that you know well, right? Your A contacts, and ask them all the same questions. Who are the good companies that are out there? Do you know anybody there? And do you mind if I use your name? Right? So what that does is it spawns your B contacts, right? So this is where it starts to get difficult, right? Because now you're calling up people that you've never met, and you're trying to get some information to help you in your search. Notice how I said that. Information to help you in your search, not help you get a job. It's not the same. What we're trying to do here is we build trust. Build trust with as many people as we can in as many places as we can. And we'll hear about a lot of jobs. All right. So the key question then is, how do we, when we talk to these people, how do we get them to give us some information, right? So my recommendation is that when we call these people up, it's really a two-stage process. I should say a two-stage conversation. But I do believe that the first 15 seconds of that phone call is crucial, right? So say you've got the name of somebody over at Encana, right? And his name is Joe. And you got Joe's name from your friend Daryl, right? So you call up Joe and you say, "Morning, Joe. My name's Darren Singleton. I got your name from my buddy Daryl over at Enterplus." And Joe says, "Oh yeah." He says, and Darren says, "I wonder if you got time for a couple of quick questions," right? So that gets you around the initial. A lot of people are hesitant to call people they don't know because they don't want to waste their time, right? So you give that person the opportunity to say, "No, I don't have time right now." Okay, so you get by that first hurdle, that first awkwardness, or that first, the fact that you feel like you are cutting into their day by saying, "Do you have time for a couple of quick questions?" And if he says, "No, I've got a land sale, I've got things to do, I'm right in the middle of budget, next week could be better," you say, "Okay, great. Well, can I call you Monday?" "Yeah, Monday would be good." "Okay, I'll call you Monday." And that's the end. And you call Monday because you said you would. Remember? We build trust by doing what we say we're going to do. In my business, I went out of my way to do things just to show people that I did what I said I was going to do. Not because I was going to get work, but because I believed if I built trust with people all day, every day, good things would happen. It's the same concept here. So the first part of your conversation or your phone call should be, "Hi, my name's Darren. I got your name from Daryl, and I wonder if you got time for a couple of quick questions." But if he does happen to say, "Yeah, I got time now," ask him a question that communicates your situation but doesn't ask for work. Okay? For instance, think about it, right? Here's Joe sitting over in Encana, right? And you call him up, and maybe Joe's an engineer, right? And you're a geologist, and you call him up and you say, "Hey, Joe, I got your name from my friend Daryl. I wonder if you have any geologist jobs over there." The hell does Joe know? He doesn't spend his day surfing the internal website knowing what jobs are out there in Canada, right? Yes, he might know, but what are the chances? So I suggest you ask him a question that communicates your situation. Something like, where should a recent graduate from the U of C geophysics program be targeting their search for full-time position, right? You're not asking him for work. You're just saying, if you were me, Joe, where would you go? Where would you look, right? So you're just asking him for advice, suggestions. And Joe will say, "Well, I don't know if we're looking for anybody at Encana here, but have you tried CNRL?" You say, "Well, I've heard some good things about CNRL. Who do you know over there?" "Oh, I know my friend Phil." "Oh, yeah, what does Phil do?" "Oh, he's in Southern Exploration." "Oh, great. Well, would you mind if I used your name when I call him?" "No, I guess that's all right." "Okay, do you have his direct line, or should I go through the switchboard?" "Oh, I got his direct line." "Okay, great. Any other companies come to mind?" "Well, have you tried Husky?" "No, I've met a couple of people over there. Who do you know over there?" Bang. So maybe Joe gives you 2 or 3 names, right? He's helped build your spider web. But the key thing here is that don't, Joe hasn't engaged in the conversation. He's just helping you out, right? So if you say to him, Joe, I wonder if we can get together for coffee, he's going to say, well, no, I don't. Because you want a face-to-face meeting with Joe, but he's not really engaged in the conversation. He's just, yeah, he's a friend of Daryl's, I'll give him a few names, help him out, right? People love to help. You got to ask a question that allows them to help, right? If you say you have any jobs for geologists over there, he can't help you, right? But this way, he's giving you some names to work with, right? So you think about that question that you ask, like a fishing trip, right? You throw a worm out in front of this guy and see if he takes the bait. Well, what Joe did, he said he took a look at that worm that you threw out, and he's, yeah, well, he's not really too interested in it, but he's a friend of Daryl's, I'll help him out. So he gives you a few names. But maybe the third person down here that you call, you throw that same bait out in front of him. He says, oh, you went to the UFC, did you? Yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, what year was that? Huh? Oh, great, yeah, and is that old reprobate, who's the geologist up there, But, you start getting a conversation going, and the guy is, now he's hooked, right? Now, there's a reason to try to reel him into the boat, to a chance to meet, right? Because if you just start trying to, a lot of people will call somebody up and say, oh, hi, my name's Darren, I got your name from my buddy Phil, and wondering if we can meet and talk about opportunities in the oil and gas business. It's just like you throw the hook into the water and you're yanking it out before the guy's even taking a nibble. So of course you're going to hear no, right? All this, I say, you're going to hear no enough times as it is looking for work. All this does is raise your chances of hearing yes, right? And I say it's a demoralizing business looking for work, right? So I tell people, you should take, at the end of the week, you should sum up all the no's that you hear and divide them by 20 and take all the yeses you hear and multiply them by 20 and then see how your week was, right? Because it's just the nature of the beast, even in a relatively hot job market, okay? So one of the things that people find here, you remember how Calgary is so small, where everybody knows everybody. It's very easy to find out who the managers are, right? And most people, when they say, well, if I'm out looking for work and I'm trying to build a relationship with somebody, trying to meet somebody, shouldn't it be the managers? Well, sure, that would be great. It would be great if you could meet the managers. But you know what? I was a manager in oil and gas. And I know where an unsolicited phone call from somebody I've never met goes on my priority list. It's a little ways down there, right? So here's the situation, right? Here's the average oil and gas company, right? And in the center of this is your chief geologist or whatever, right? And he's got all these teams and all these geologists report to him. And yes, they know what's going on in all those things, and it would be great if you could meet them. Great if you could meet that manager, but do you know how many calls a week they get from people looking for work? Because everybody knows them. You got people like Dave James, who everybody knows. He gets 20 calls a week. So A, how does he decide who he's going to respond to? It's just, so basically trying to connect with managers is an exercise in futility. Anybody can be your link to that job, and not just the managers. So by all means, try to talk to get through and try to connect to the managers, but don't focus on them, or it's you'll find it more frustrating than satisfying. One of the techniques or one of the ideas that was suggested to me when I was looking for work is that if you are targeting managers, call them outside core hours. And I would verify that is a good strategy if you really feel you need to contact the managers. Because when I was manager at Crestar, it was meeting till 11:30. Lunch, meeting, right? I was just never in my office, right? So that is a useful strategy. Sometimes it works. Try them outside of core hours.
What are inside core hours?
Well, before 8 and after 5. Before 8 is generally better. I think it sends a more powerful, a better message to people. Right? I'm up early. I'm keen. I'm out here. I'm trying. So that's the basics. So if you're having trouble with the job search process, most often I would say it's because you're not asking the right question. You're not allowing people to help. You're not giving them a chance to give you information to help you expand your network. Okay? So that's the basics of it. But there's other pieces to it once you sort of get farther along and you actually get your job, right? So one of the things that will happen is that your first, like people like yourself, Lee and Eamon, your first jobs may be on contract, right? And in fact, the majority of people that come into oil and gas that didn't have a job straight out of university, the majority usually end up working on contract for 1 or 2 years. Is that right, Chris?
That's right.
Yeah. And what happens then is that because you're doing contract to contract, you're going to end up looking for work over and over again over the first 2 or 3 years. So you better get good at this, right? Because that's just the way that the industry tends to handle people who come in not through the standard university recruiting. So one of the pieces is that once you get that new job, say you got your job at, you got a 6-month contract at CNRL, right? So you get settled in there, you get your new email address, you get your new contact information. I suggest you send out an email, right, to all those people that you came in contact with, right, and say, hi, this is Eamon. I just wanted to call and let you all know where I ended up. I've got a 6-month contract here at, where did I say? CNRL. I've got a 6-month contract here at CNRL, so here's my new contact information. I wanted to thank you all for all your help in my job search. And if I can ever do anything for you, please let me know. All right? So that does a whole bunch of things. That tells people that this is where I am, this is where I can be reached. It tells them that in 6 months, I'm going to be looking again. And it also tells them that I'm getting some experience that may make me more appealing to you in 6 months' time, right? So it's a powerful little email you want to send out to keep everyone abreast of where you're at, right? And there will be people, as you go through your job search, you remember that house, there'll be people who just go out of their way to help. Do all kinds of things for you, give you all kinds of contact information, all kinds of, they for whatever reason, they really connected with you, right? Those people, you want, once you get that new job, you want to call that person up and say, hi, this is Dustin. I just wanted to call you up and thank you personally for all the help and assistance and encouragement you gave me in my job search. And I hope I can buy you lunch and thank you personally, right? That person has the opportunity to be one of the big bricks in your basement, right? And so you want to cement that relationship. Get back together with them, right? You see the value in that? Because you may need them again and again. Resumes are an important part of the process, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about resumes because that's almost a topic on its own. But I recommend to people there's 3 things they want to try to communicate in a resume. That's results, responsibility level, and something that communicates the pace of your day. Right? So this might be better explained via example. Say when if you're a well site geologist, for instance, right? I've talked to a lot of well site geologists who want to get into the office, right? And they say, well, you know, so I take a look at their resume and they say, well, you know, I picked core points, I communicated with the office, all these kinds of things, and I look at that and I say, well, that's all great. You know, I'm sure those were tasks that you had to do as a well site geologist. In fact, I'm so sure you don't even have to tell me that, right? Because there are certain things that are understood by the title that you had to do. Well, what's important for the prospective employer is something that communicates the responsibility level, you know? Like, in other words, maybe I've sat wells from 500 meters to 2,500 meters in depth, right? 2,500 meter deep well, that's an expensive well. It's a lot of responsibility. Something that communicates the pace of your day, right? Responsible for 3 rigs simultaneously drilling heavy oil in the, you know, for Nexon's Long Lake project or whatever it is, right? Something that tells people that you can multitask and you can keep a lot of things going, because every company in town wants somebody who can multitask. And results, this is a key thing for people when they get into the more senior levels. When you're hiring an explorationist, this is a key thing. And so we communicate those through, you know, this is how many wells I drilled, this is the success rate, this is how much reserves were found. Those things, we don't always have those to show when we're just starting our career, but those become very important. So I say I'm not going to spend a lot of time on resumes, but those 3 things, if you can put them in there. And I say, for my money, use numbers wherever possible to communicate these things, right? And when you use a number, use the number, not the text, right? Remember that HR person with that stack. They're looking for these things, right? And you want those numbers to stand out from the text, right? So they got something to grab onto. And also, you know, typically people group their resumes in you know, chronologic format, right? So I was at ABC Company, right? And I was a geologist there, right? And so I prospected in such and such an area. I was responsible for supervising, you know, a tech and whatever. And they have all these bullet points behind them. I suggest to people that if you've got these things to put in with numbers associated with them, you put them at the top of the list. Because that HR person, remember they have the 30-second scan, right? They pick up that resume and they kind of give her one of these, it feels like a couple of pages, 2-3 pages, right? So they got 30-second scan, so they look at the first page, and so that gets 15 seconds, second page gets 10, the last one gets 5, right? So what that means is that when they read this, when they get to this subheading here, they're only going to read the first 2 or 3 bullets, and then they're going to skim, right? And then they're going to go to the next subheading, and they're going to read the first 2 or 3 bullets, and then they're going to skim. So anything that's real important, that better be in those first 2 or 3 bullets, or it's going to get missed. That's a little subtlety that not everybody really realizes. But again, if you understand the process that's going on inside the HR community, it becomes important. One of the things that we talked about here is that you know, we're trying to build a relationship, but we're also trying to be we're trying to spread our network as far and as wide as we can, as fast as we can, right? And I've already talked to some of you about this before, but business cards are extremely important. Business cards are extremely important, Dustin. I built my business with no website, no advertising, just by giving away 2 business cards to every person I met, right? So I would suggest you do the same Whenever you meet somebody new, give them 2 business cards, because you don't know who they're going to run into. You don't know if they're going to run into somebody on their way back to their office that says, geez, I sure could use a young geophysicist around here. Oh, really? You might try this guy. You don't know if they go back to their office and walk down to the manager and say, I met this young guy, seemed pretty sharp. We ever need one? You don't know. You don't know where it goes, but I do know it's no good to you in your pocket. But business cards are extremely important. So that's basically the process, right? Understand what it is you're trying to achieve, building trust. Building trust by face-to-face contact with as many people as you can. Build that spider web so that you access and you hear about as many jobs as possible, right? I've recently been looking for work as a geophysicist again. And my network within this town is huge now. So I heard about a lot of stuff, right? Keep in mind that what we want to do is find the right job, not just a job. Because every geologic job, every geophysics job, every engineering job is not created equal. So part of the process of talking to people is that you're learning about which companies are good, which ones you might want to work with, which ones suit your sort of philosophy and your personality, right? And so by hearing about more, we're not as apt to make a bad decision. We're not as apt to be forced to take the first one that comes along. I'd like to thank you all for coming and your attention, and I hope you'll be able to utilize some of these tips in your career and maybe to find that first job in Canada. Thanks very much.